Hello everybody. We are here this morning in the Japanese garden at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I'm Christina and this is Cassidy, and we are going to give you a tour of the Japanese garden today because it is absolutely full of color. You can see behind us here there's a dogwood in bloom. The azaleas are starting to pop out everywhere, and those are both things that will be at their peak this week that you should reserve your tickets to come and see. So we'll go ahead and turn this camera around so that you can see this flowering dogwood up close. And this is probably the last week to see these at their peak. They've been blooming for a couple weeks now. And here in the background, far away, you can see right here, this is one of our origami in the garden sculptures. So if you haven't come and seen that, that's something new for you to enjoy while you're here as well. And you can see all these azaleas blooming underneath the canopy of these dogwoods here as well. So there's so much color to enjoy right now here in the Japanese garden.
And the last little bit of cherry season is upon us here. The double flowered cherries here, the Kanzan, they're dropping their petals right now. It's really pretty when the wind picks up actually, but they're done for the season almost.
They still do have quite a few blooms on them, but their leaves are coming out. And as Cassidy said, you can see beneath the tree here how many of their petals have already fallen. So this is one of the last cherry trees that's in bloom right now.
Yeah, and actually the Yoshino cherries that are across the path here on the hill have been done for a couple of weeks, and I was even noticing some of the fruit start to come out on the branches. So here's the little cherries here starting to form, and they won't get too much bigger, but they'll turn a nice dark purple. Good bird food, I can tell you from experience, not particularly pleasant people food.
You can see some white azaleas here. So far we've shown you on this tour mostly the pink varieties. And these actually, you can see all their buds, but these ones aren't quite in bloom yet, as is the case with a few around here. But some of these are already opening up. So the azaleas, depending on their varieties, they do come sort of in waves, but right now is peak time for a lot of them, and they'll be going on for a few more weeks as some of the later varieties come in.
And you'll just see as we walk the path, this loop around the lake here, I mean, you'll just see those pops of colors coming out, the hot pinks and the bright reds and the soft purples. Over there on Crane Island, you can see a nice purple rhododendron. Here we're kind of getting a look back at that tree that we started under, and the azalea is blooming there as well. And just really beautiful from this standpoint because you have all those nice dark reds and purples from the Japanese maples farther down the shore. So just really lots and lots of color in here, including green finally, as the trees start to leaf out, and it really encloses this space so much more than when there were no leaves on the trees and you could see so much more sky. Up here on the hill are a couple of red buds. This is probably the last week or so for them looking at their peak, much like the dogwoods and the cherries before them. As the leaves start to come out, the flowers tend to fall off and it moves into that stage of its annual life cycle where it's got the leaves out and soaking up all that sun. So probably the last week for the red buds as well. And again, you can just see all the different colors in here, from the azaleas and the pines and the really bright sort of almost lime color from the new leaves, the new growth coming out on a lot of these trees. And so it really just paints the landscape with all these different little patches of color.
And here we were talking about the red of the Japanese maples. We can see one up close here.
And I don't know how well it'll show up, but you can see here the flowers, but then also the little fruits, the little samaras starting to form. So we have the flowers themselves, and then these are the fruits with the little seeds, just like on the big maples you might have in your neighborhood that have these little papery enclosures that kind of act like helicopters when they let loose and fall to the ground. So a lot going on here in addition to just the pretty color itself. I mean, this one tree, depending on how the sun hits it, I mean, this is the same tree here that we were just looking at, but as we move into the sun, you can see how much brighter red this color looks. And even catching bits of green in some parts of the tree as well. So pretty dynamic for just one of many, many Japanese maples we have here in the Japanese garden. Something Christina and I have noticed, and I think a number of allergy sufferers will be on board with us here, but a lot of the pines in the Japanese garden are releasing their pollen right now, and we've noticed birds kind of jumping back and forth on branches and knocking a lot of that pollen into the air. So definitely something that makes me sneeze if I'm not wearing a mask. Oh, and here I see lots of azaleas, but a number of our tree peonies are also in bloom. So the tree peonies have woodier stems that last even when the flowers and foliage dies off in the winter, as opposed to the other peonies that will die back to the ground in winter. So you can see that might even be a little past it, peak, that particular one, but we have some really nice ones up here as well. And with the azaleas throwing that pop of color, I mean, Christina, just where you're at here,
Yeah.
so much going on.
And in the background, more of those Kanzan cherries, Japanese maples, azaleas.
Here's kind of a pretty scene here where this cherry tree has been losing all of its petals, and down below we have the little trickle of water on the basin here, and you can see all those cherry petals just kind of floating there in the water with the azalea on, in the background. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, I'd really like to see this on person instead of on my phone or a computer screen, the garden is open Tuesdays through Sundays, and because we're moving into such a nice weather season, and we're still dealing with some capacity limits at the moment per city health department orders, I would recommend ordering tickets early, especially if you look at that 7-day forecast for weather and see a pick day kind of like we have today that we're open. I would recommend getting those tickets in advance so that you can come and see this in person for yourselves. Maybe come and take a peaceful moment sitting here by this basin surrounded by azaleas. More of the flowers and fruits on these Japanese maples. So on this one in particular, you have these clusters of red underneath that newly leafed out green. It's a nice contrast.
We've passed a few of these now, but let's get up close on this white flowering dogwood. We started the tour with a pink variety, but you can really see the detail. Some of these blossoms are a little lower to the ground.
Yeah, and a really pretty view, kind of another spot where we have just those layers of color is right here at one of the entrances to the zigzag bridge, and you can see this Japanese maple in the foreground, and then as you move to the side a little bit here, you get that hot pink azalea with the white of the dogwood. And then you can see another one of those soft purple clouds basically over there on Tortoise Island.
We were noticing earlier how nice that reflection is coming off of the island there in the water.
Yeah, this is just a really pretty spot. And we'll mention the zigzag bridge is open. All of our outdoor spaces are open while the garden is open, which is a fairly recent change. So come and explore all of your favorite outdoor places. And most of the indoor places are open as well. There are some closures for construction or to allow our staff to work with the plant collections in the indoor spaces. But even places like the Climatron are open, or at least partially open now, every day that we're open. And we still have some bluebells going here in the shade at the back of the Japanese garden.
These have been around for a while now.
More of those tree peonies here. And then this is a spot I know a lot of people are big fans of. I see this so often in photography that people post from the garden online. Is this spot here with the azaleas in the dry garden here at the south end of the Japanese garden. And you can see how many of these large bushes are just full of flowers. Still have a few that are coming in, but really this is about as close to peak as you'll get in an area like this before the leaves and things start forcing their way through and overtake the flowers.
And you can kind of see that starting to happen on some of these that are at their fullest bloom.
But it's so pretty right here, and definitely an area that I know we see a lot of people taking pictures of. A great spot to let the kids go over to the flat bridge and feed the koi while mom and dad maybe come over and take a moment to enjoy the flowers. And by the way, I don't know if we've mentioned this before on one of our tours, Christina, but if you'd like to feed the koi, the feeders that are here at the bridge are actually closed off at the moment. So you need to buy koi food. You can buy koi food in the gift shop when you first come through the temporary visitor center at the front of the garden. So I would highly recommend doing that. You get a nice big bag and you'll make a lot of these fish very happy. On a nice sunny day like this, you can see they're all milling about, probably wondering where our fish food is. I forgot to bring some. And maybe we could take one more stop because there's one other thing that's in bloom, and this is probably the last few days to see it here in the Japanese garden. It's another one of those favorites that kind of shows up So we're gonna head over to the Plum viewing arbor and over towards Tea House Island. But as we walk there, you can see we have some of the more traditional peonies that are actually starting to come in bloom right now. Only one or two plants out of this whole display of peonies here that's at that point where they're getting ready to open. The others you can see some buds on, but aren't quite there yet, so probably another week, maybe two, before they're really going. Just really nice bright reds here. I mean, the Japanese maples, now that they've come in, have really added so much more of a dynamic to this landscape just in the last couple of weeks. And we'll turn here and head towards Tea House Island. Just to echo what I was mentioning earlier, the outdoor space is being open. That's true of Plum Viewing Arbor over here, which you can see has this really nice azalea and some Japanese maples, and a lot of that red in the background are actually the cherry plums that hit their flowering peak about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So Plum Viewing Arbor is open. It's a great place to come and sit. Tea House Island is actually closed to the public and is, for the most part, year-round, so that is still closed. But what we're going to do is come over and show you one other thing that's in bloom right now, and again, probably just for this week. Is this Wisteria here. You can see these big bunches of flowers hanging off the arbor or off these supports just above the water. Definitely the peak time to come and see these. And as you can kind of see, panning across the lake, really just all kinds of color.
So thank you all for tuning in today to our virtual tour. As you can see, it's a really, really lovely time to come and visit, especially here in the Japanese garden. You can also see azaleas in the English woodland garden and in other areas throughout the garden as well. So if that's a favorite of yours, this week is definitely a great time to visit. So we'll go ahead and end here. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.